the quiet one. The Academy of Orion Prime was a place where brilliance, ambition, and competition collided. Its students were among the most promising young minds in the galaxy, each eager to prove themselves in the rigorous trials designed to test their intelligence, endurance, and courage. Yet among them was one boy who seemed almost invisible. Cale Draven was quiet to the point of being forgotten. He had a slight frame with dark hair that fell just above his piercing green eyes. There was nothing outwardly remarkable about him. No flashy clothes, no bold displays of talent, no loud laughter to draw attention. He moved through the halls like a shadow, always observing, never participating in the chatter that filled the corridors. Teachers noticed him only when necessary. Classmates noticed him even less. Some whispered about his silence, calling him aloof, mysterious, or even strange. Others dismissed him entirely, assuming he was slow, timid, or lacking ambition. But Cale was none of these things. Inside him burned a quiet fire, a mind constantly analyzing, calculating, and preparing for challenges far beyond the understanding of those around him. While others studied for exams or competed for recognition, Cale studied the world around him. He watched the way light bent through the Academy's towering windows in the afternoon, noting the smallest details and shadows. He observed how fellow students reacted under pressure, learning their habits, strengths, and weaknesses. To him, knowledge extended far beyond textbooks. It lay in the subtleties of behavior, the patterns of nature, and the hidden rules that governed every interaction. His peers, of course, remained oblivious. In classes, Cale rarely spoke. He didn't raise his hand, didn't volunteer answers, and barely contributed to group projects. Yet when he did speak, it was concise, precise, and often far ahead of anyone else in insight. A single sentence from Cale could clarify confusion, reveal hidden truths, or offer solutions no one else had considered. But such moments were rare, and for most of his classmates, he remained the silent one, the shadow at the edge of every room. Life at Orion Prime was demanding, and Cale thrived in solitude. He spent his free hours in the Academy's vast library, reading about alien species, survival techniques, and advanced strategies for exploration and combat. While others socialized or sought fame, Cale was training his mind and body in quiet secrecy, preparing for challenges he knew were coming. And then one morning the announcement arrived, the Deathworld Test. The Academy's headmaster, Irinder Vallis, stood at the center of the grand hall, his voice echoing through the vaulted ceilings. The Deathworld Test is the ultimate trial of our students. You will be sent to worlds hostile to life, where danger is constant and survival is never guaranteed. Only those who combine intelligence, courage, and adaptability will succeed. The room erupted in excitement. Students whispered eagerly, trading predictions about who would survive, who would fail, and who would emerge as a hero. The usual stars of the Academy, brash, confident, and loud, boasted of their inevitable victories. Cale remained silent as always. He didn't need to make predictions. He didn't need to boast. He simply listened. He watched his peers reveal their fears and overconfidence alike. In the cacophony of voices, Cale noticed patterns: who panicked under pressure, who relied on brute force, and who could think clearly in chaos. These observations, he knew, would be more valuable than any weapons or training. Some students sneered at him. Ryan Vaylor, a tall, muscular boy with a permanent smirk, leaned back in his chair and whispered to a friend, "Cale? He won't last a day. Can't even speak up in class, and now he thinks he can survive a death world." Cale said nothing. He simply met Ryan's gaze briefly, an unreadable expression crossing his features. There was no fear, no arrogance, just calm. Ryan, like many others, assumed it was weakness. But Cale knew that calm, that patience, was a weapon far stronger than words or fists. As the day progressed, Cale began to prepare. While others rushed to pack weapons, survival kits, and flashy gadgets, Cale focused on the essentials: understanding the environment he might face, memorizing survival protocols, and preparing mentally for the isolation and danger of a world that could kill in moments. He trained his senses to notice the slightest change in air pressure, the faintest shift in shadow, the quietest sound that might hint at lurking danger. By evening, the Academy grounds were alive with energy. Students practiced combat drills, strategized in groups, and competed to show off their readiness. Cale, as always, remained apart, walking alone to a quiet courtyard where the sky's twin moons reflected in the still water. He closed his eyes and envisioned the challenges ahead, not as obstacles but as tests of skill, intellect, and resilience. In that quiet space, Cale's mind was alive. He reviewed every scenario, anticipated every danger, and rehearsed countless strategies. He did not need applause, recognition, or approval. He needed only one thing: to survive, and to excel where others would fail. That night, as the academy's lights dimmed and the halls emptied, Cale sat under the moons, silent yet prepared. He was the quiet one, yes, but beneath that silence lay a mind sharper than any blade, instincts honed like a predator's, and courage that no fear could shake. No one in the academy truly knew him. No one imagined the storm that slept behind his calm green eyes. And when the Deathworld test began, the students who had ignored, mocked, or dismissed Cale would soon learn the truth. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is also the deadliest, and the most capable of survival. Because Cale Draven was not merely silent, he was ready. The arrival. The moment the academy announced the Deathworld test, excitement and fear rippled through the students. But nothing could have truly prepared them for the experience of stepping onto Zyra 9, the planet designated for their first trial. Cale Draven, silent as ever, felt a surge of focus rather than fear. While others packed weapons, gadgets, and emergency kits in frantic anticipation, Cale carefully reviewed the minimal equipment he would carry. He trusted his mind, his observation skills, and his instincts far more than any weapon. When the students were teleported to Zyra 9, the transition was disorienting. One moment they were in the familiar halls of Orion Prime, and the next, the world around them was alien and menacing. Jagged cliffs jutted from the ground like broken teeth, and the sky swirled with violent purple storms that cast erratic shadows across the landscape. Strange bioluminescent plants glowed faintly in the darkness, casting eerie reflections that danced across rocky terrain. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, ozone, minerals, and a faint, musky odor that hinted at predators lurking unseen. The students scrambled, some stumbling over rocks, others dropping supplies in panic. Their excitement quickly turned into anxiety as the reality of the planet sank in. Cale, on the other hand, moved quietly, assessing every detail. He crouched to study tracks in the dirt, noting the patterns of local wildlife. He observed the wind's direction, the faint hum of insects, and the movement of shadows among the cliffs. He wasn't just surviving, he was learning, cataloging every detail for future use. The first group to take initiative was led by Ryan Vaylor, the boastful prodigy who had openly mocked Cale in class. Ryan charged forward, swinging a plasma blade at thin air, hoping to demonstrate bravery. Within minutes, he was nearly mauled by a pack of small, venomous predators, saved only by a teammate's quick intervention. Cale didn't move to help immediately. He observed silently, noting the predators' speed, patterns, and the mistakes of the humans. Once Ryan and his team scrambled to safety, Cale approached them with calm precision, offering guidance on the safest path through the rocky terrain. His advice was brief but accurate, directing them to higher ground and away from ambush points. How do you even see that?" one of the students whispered, awe and fear mixed in her voice. Cale simply shook his head. "Watch. Learn. Survive." His words were few, but they carried weight far beyond the panic-stricken chatter of his peers. As the group continued, Cale's silence became a strange source of curiosity. Students who had ignored him now found themselves glancing at him repeatedly, wondering what he saw, what he knew, and how he moved with such confidence. Even Ryan, pride still stinging from his earlier mistakes, couldn't hide the begrudging respect forming in his eyes. Hours passed and the terrain only grew more hostile. The cliffs narrowed into jagged canyons, rivers of molten minerals cut across paths, and storms of acidic rain began to fall, forcing the students to seek shelter. Many struggled to adapt, slipping, falling, and arguing over who should lead. Cale, by contrast, identified a hidden overhang protected from the rain and guided a small group to it. Here, Cale's calm demeanor shone. While others panicked, he assessed threats methodically. He taught his companions to read the environment, how the wind carried scents, how subtle markings indicated predator movement, and how the unstable ground signaled imminent danger. For the first time, some students began to see him not as the silent, unassuming boy, but as someone whose intellect and observation could be a lifeline in a world designed to kill. Night fell, and the forest around them came alive with sounds that set hearts racing. Strange creatures skittered in the darkness, their eyes glowing faintly, watching, calculating. The students huddled together, whispering in fear. Cale sat slightly apart, scanning the shadows with quiet intensity. Every rustle, every faint footstep, every change in the wind was data. He predicted where predators might strike, and when one of the glowing-eyed creatures ventured too close, Cale's quick thinking and calm directions allowed the group to avoid confrontation entirely. Ryan, watching him, muttered under his breath, I didn't think he'd survive this." And yet, Cale ignored the comment. He had no time for pride, ego, or recognition. Every moment was a lesson, every danger an opportunity to test his abilities and sharpen his mind. As dawn broke over the jagged horizon, the landscape shifted once more. Pools of iridescent liquid reflected the pale light of Zyra 9's sun, and strange plant life released spores that shimmered in the morning haze. For most students, the beauty was overshadowed by danger. For Kale, it was a map of survival. He memorized patterns, noting where predators were likely to hunt, where shelter could be found, and how to navigate efficiently without drawing attention. By the end of the first day, the difference between Kale and his classmates was clear. While others relied on brute force, panic, or luck, Kale relied on observation, intelligence, and calculated risk. He had already begun to map the planet in his mind, predicting dangers, planning routes, and preparing for challenges that others didn't yet see. And though he remained silent, his actions spoke louder than words. He had thrived where others had barely survived. The Academy's stars had stumbled, faltered, and nearly failed, while Kale moved with the confidence of someone who had already mastered the rules of this deadly game. As the students set up a makeshift camp for the night, whispering anxiously about what the next day might bring, Kale sat quietly, gazing at the alien horizon. He felt no fear, only anticipation. The Deathworld test was designed to break the weak and elevate the strong, and Kale knew exactly where he stood. He was not weak. He was not unprepared. He was ready. And when the test truly began, he would not just survive, he would thrive. Because Kale Draven was no ordinary student. He was the quiet one, the shadow in the corner, the mind that saw the world differently. And on Zyra 9, in a place where every step could mean death, that difference would be the key to his survival, and the beginning of a legend that would echo through the halls of Orion Prime for years to come. The first trial. The morning light on Zyra 9 revealed the full scale of the challenges that awaited the students. The jagged cliffs, glowing flora, and alien terrain were intimidating enough in themselves, but today the Academy announced the real test would begin. The first trial was deceptively simple in concept. Retrieve a rare energy crystal from a valley teeming with Vorith beasts, massive predators known for their crystalline armor and lightning-fast reflexes. In theory it sounded straightforward. In practice, it was a gauntlet of danger, fear, and the kind of unpredictability that had destroyed many unprepared participants in previous years. As the students gathered at the edge of the valley, nerves were visible on every face. Most whispered among themselves, speculating about strategies, boasting about their abilities, or quietly praying for luck. Kale Draven, as always, stood apart, silent, calm, and observant. The others saw him as quiet, weak, and untested. Kale saw the world differently. To him, everything was data, wind direction, predator patterns, terrain obstacles, and even the emotional states of his peers. Each student's panic, overconfidence, or hesitation told him more about survival than any weapon or tool ever could. Ryan Vaylor, still smarting from his earlier near-disaster, puffed up his chest and declared loudly, "I'll get that crystal first. Just watch me." Several students followed him, thinking strength and aggression would carry them through the trial. Kale did not follow. He observed. From a distance, he noted the Vorith beasts moving with surprising intelligence. Their crystalline armor reflected light in a way that made them almost invisible at certain angles. They hunted not just with brute force but with strategy, working in packs to corner prey. Any misstep would mean instant death. Kale crouched behind a rocky outcrop, analyzing every movement. He calculated the creature's patrol patterns, the safe zones in the terrain, and the timing needed to traverse dangerous areas. While others charged in recklessly, Kale was already planning his path with precision, noting where natural cover could be used to avoid detection, where small rocks could be displaced to create distractions, and how the predator's reflexes could be exploited. The first group, led by Ryan, made a disastrous attempt. They sprinted into the valley, weapons raised. A Vorith leapt from the shadows, its crystalline armor glinting in the sunlight. The group panicked, scattering in all directions. Screams echoed as one student was grazed by claws, another fell into a spiked pit hidden beneath foliage. Ryan managed to pull himself up, but his pride was wounded, and his team's cohesion shattered. Kale moved silently. Step by step, he advanced along a narrow path, hugging the rocks, staying just outside the predator's vision. When a beast paused to investigate a noise from the panicked group, Kale used a loose rock to draw its attention in the opposite direction, creating a perfect distraction. He was never seen, never threatened, and never rushed. Every action was deliberate, every movement calculated. Reaching the center of the valley, Kale observed the energy crystal from a safe vantage point. It was perched atop a small pedestal, glowing faintly with an inner light, and surrounded by 3 Vorith beasts. Most students would have rushed in blindly, but Kale noticed something crucial. The predators communicated with subtle vibrations through the ground. By timing his approach to their movements and using the terrain for cover, he could get the crystal without engaging in direct combat. He placed small reflective fragments from his pack strategically, angling sunlight to disorient the predators when the time came. Then, with a swift, precise dash, he reached the pedestal, lifted the crystal, and retreated along the same carefully calculated path. Not a single creature touched him, not a single weapon fired. Kale had done the impossible, not through strength but through observation, intelligence, and patience. When he emerged from the valley, his classmates stared in disbelief. Many were bruised, shaken, or injured. Ryan Vaylor approached, struggling to conceal his envy. I don't understand, he stammered. How did you? Kale simply held up the crystal, his expression calm, almost serene. Observe. Adapt. Survive, he said quietly. The words were simple, but their meaning was profound. The students were beginning to see a pattern. Kale's silence was not weakness, it was power. His ability to think, plan, and act under extreme pressure made him far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The instructors observed from a distance, nodding with approval. This was exactly what the Deathworld test was designed to measure. Not raw strength but the ingenuity, adaptability, and resilience that define true human potential. Kale was demonstrating it in its purest form. By the end of the trial, the valley had claimed several students who had underestimated the dangers. Many were shaken, some injured, but Kale emerged untouched, the crystal in his hand, and a quiet confidence radiating from him. Where others had rushed, panicked, or relied on brute force, Kale had relied on his mind, a human mind capable of analyzing, predicting, and mastering even the most lethal of environments. That evening, as the students regrouped at a safe camp, whispers about Kale spread like wildfire. Did you see how he moved? He wasn't even touched, one student said in awe. I thought he was just a quiet nobody, another added, but he's something else. Even Ryan Vaylor, pride still bruised but respect growing, couldn't deny the truth. Kale Draven, the silent one in class, had not only survived the first trial, he had dominated it, proving that intellect, patience, and observation could overcome even the deadliest physical threats. As night fell over Zyra 9, Kale sat slightly apart from the group, staring at the alien stars above. The trial had been a test, but it was only the beginning. He knew more challenges awaited, creatures more cunning, environments more deadly, but Kale welcomed them. He thrived in danger not because he sought glory but because he understood the rules of survival. And tomorrow, when the next stage of the Deathworld test began, Kale Draven would once again prove that the quiet one in class was not merely capable. He was unstoppable. Allies and envy. The sun had barely risen over Zyra 9 when Kale Draven and the surviving students emerged from the valley, exhausted but alive. The first trial had ended, leaving the weaker unprepared students injured, shaken, or questioning their abilities. Yet among them, one figure stood apart, calm and unscathed, carrying the glowing energy crystal like a badge of quiet mastery. Kale's classmates could no longer ignore him. The whispers began almost immediately. Some expressed awe, others jealousy. Most were struggling to comprehend how the boy who had barely spoken in class had outmaneuvered deadly Vorith beasts when the so-called stars of the academy had faltered. Ryan Vaylor, who had once mocked Kale openly, approached with a tight smile, his pride barely concealing frustration. You got lucky, he said, though even he seemed unconvinced. The rest of us could have done the same if... He trailed off, unable to finish the lie. Kale tilted his head slightly, his green eyes calm and focused. Luck doesn't survive a death world, Ryan, he said softly. Observation, planning, and patience do. The words, simple as they were, struck a chord. Several students who had followed Ryan's reckless charge now looked to Kale, their expressions a mixture of relief, admiration, and newfound respect. Among the group were those who sought to align with Kale. Leora Vex, a clever strategist with sharp reflexes, approached him cautiously. Kale, I saw how you moved, she said quietly. You're different. We could work together. You and I, combine our skills, we could actually survive the next trial. Kale studied her briefly, silent, weighing the value of alliance versus independence. After a moment he nodded subtly. We survive together or not at all, he said. No boast, no pride, just a statement of fact. Leora smiled, recognizing that beneath Kale's calm exterior was a mind honed for survival. However, not everyone was impressed. Several students, particularly those whose ego had been bruised by the first trial, regarded Cale with suspicion and envy. Ryan Vaylor, still reeling from his earlier failure, began quietly plotting. "He's just lucky," Ryan muttered to a friend as Cale walked past. "He won't survive the next stage. I'll make sure of it." Others, more subtle, began to gossip. "Do you think he really knows what he's doing, or is he just hiding behind silence?" One student whispered. "I mean, he got lucky once, but this is the Deathworld test. Luck runs out." Cale heard none of this. He didn't need to. His focus remained on the next stage, the next environment, and the next challenge. Every whispered doubt, every sneer of envy was irrelevant. They were distractions, and distractions were deadly on Zyra 9. As the group navigated through the rugged terrain toward the next trial, Cale's methodical mind began to map threats and resources. He pointed out safe paths, identified potential predator zones, and demonstrated subtle techniques to minimize risk. Those who followed his guidance moved with more confidence, while the jealous students struggled, still relying on brute force or panic-driven decision-making. By midday, it became clear who would naturally become Cale's allies. Leora, along with two others, Jarek Thane, a quiet but strong tracker, and Mira Solis, a quick-thinking medic, aligned themselves with Cale. Together, the four formed a small, efficient unit. They moved silently, communicated with gestures and subtle signals, and operated almost like a single mind. Meanwhile, Ryan continued to fume, unable to accept his failure and frustrated by the attention Cale now received. He whispered to others who shared his envy, attempting to sow discord. "We don't need him," Ryan hissed. "We can do this ourselves. Trust him and we'll die before the next trial is over." But even in his scheming, Ryan underestimated Cale. Cale anticipated human behavior with the same precision he anticipated predator movements. He noted the jealousy, the grudges, and the petty rivalries forming around him. And he prepared, silently, for the ways these human conflicts might become as dangerous as any alien threat. The contrast between Cale and his peers was becoming more pronounced. While many relied on impulse, aggression, or luck, Cale relied on thought, observation, and calculated action. Leora and the others recognized this immediately, quietly following his lead, learning from his methods, and growing more confident under his guidance. That evening, as the group settled into a small natural cave for shelter, the discussion of alliances and enmities continued. Leora turned to Cale. "You make it look effortless," she said. "But I can see you're thinking 5 steps ahead all the time. How do you do it?" Cale's gaze drifted toward the glowing horizon of Zyra 9. "I don't react," he said quietly. "I anticipate. I observe. I adapt. That's the difference between surviving and dying here." Leora nodded, absorbing his words. In that moment she realized something important. Cale's silence was not emptiness, it was focus. It was strength. It was the very reason he had thrived when others had stumbled. Meanwhile, Ryan Vaylor seethed in the shadows, plotting ways to undermine Cale and assert himself as the dominant force among the students. But Cale did not worry about Ryan's schemes. He had already accounted for human error, jealousy, and treachery. In his mind, every possibility had a response. Every threat, human or alien, was part of the larger puzzle. As night fell over Zyra 9, Cale lay under the alien sky, staring at the distant, jagged horizon. He understood that survival on this planet was not just about strength, it was about strategy, unity, and adaptability. And while envy and rivalry would always exist among humans, it was the disciplined, observant, and intelligent who would ultimately endure. Cale Draven, the silent one in class, had gained allies who respected his mind, endured the envy of those who underestimated him, and cemented his reputation as someone to watch. The first trial was over, but the real challenges were just beginning. And Cale knew one thing for certain. In a world designed to test every weakness, he would continue to thrive, not because he sought glory but because he understood the true meaning of survival. For on Zyra 9, it was not the loudest, strongest, or most aggressive who endured. It was the quiet, the observant, the human mind at its sharpest. Cale Draven had proven it once. And he would prove it again. The dark forest. The warning came with the dawn. A message broadcast across the students' communicators announced the next stage of the Deathworld test, the dark forest. Unlike the open valleys or jagged cliffs they had navigated before, the dark forest was a place of shadows, illusions, and constant danger. Its trees towered hundreds of meters high, their twisted branches forming a dense canopy that blotted out the sky. Strange mists clung to the ground, swirling unpredictably, and the air hummed with a low, almost imperceptible vibration. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow seemed alive. Most students approached with fear in their eyes, clutching weapons tightly, ready for anything. Cale Draven, as always, moved silently, scanning the environment with careful attention. To him, the dark forest was a puzzle, a challenge to be understood rather than feared. His small group, Leora Vex, Jarek Thane and Mira Solis, followed him closely. They had learned to trust his instincts, to follow his subtle hand gestures and nods that communicated more than words ever could. Their survival depended on him and they knew it. The moment they entered the forest, the atmosphere changed. Mist shifted, hiding the uneven terrain and the hidden predators that lurked among the roots. Trees groaned as if alive, and faint glowing eyes reflected from every direction. Every step carried the risk of triggering a trap, natural or artificial. "Stay close," Cale whispered, his voice barely audible. "Move slowly. Observe everything." The group followed his lead. While others in the forest panicked at every sound, Cale's calm allowed him to notice subtle patterns. The way the mist shifted, the faint disturbances in the soil, the occasional ripple of movement in the shadows. He began marking safe paths with small rocks and scratches on the bark, leaving a trail that could guide them back or help them avoid predators. Not long into the forest, the first test appeared. A series of alien creatures known as Goroth spines emerged from the fog, thin, spindly predators with reflective carapaces and lightning-fast strikes. Most students reacted instinctively, attacking with brute force or fleeing blindly. Several were grazed by claws, others stumbled into hidden pits. Cale, however, assessed the creatures calmly. He observed their movements, their reflex patterns and their reaction to sound. With a few well-placed stones and subtle misdirections, he diverted the Goroth spines away from the group, allowing them to pass unharmed. His companions began to whisper in awe. "How does he do that?" Mira Solis asked quietly. "Observation," Leora replied. "He sees what we don't." But the forest had more than predators. It had illusions designed to prey on the mind. Shadows twisted into shapes that resembled past fears, distant sounds mimicked familiar voices, and the mists played tricks that made paths appear longer, shorter, or even reversed. Many students, disoriented, wandered in circles, trapped by their own panic. Cale, however, relied on logic and deduction. He noted inconsistencies, the sound of footsteps that didn't match the terrain, shadows that moved against the light, the smell of plants that indicated solid ground versus hidden pits. Step by step, he guided his team deeper into the forest, always alert, always analyzing. By midday, they reached a natural clearing, a small plateau illuminated by faint bioluminescent plants. It seemed safe, but Cale knew better. His sharp eyes noticed the faint ripple of the ground, the slight tension in the surrounding mist. The predators were close, lying in wait. "Spread out, but stay within sight," Cale instructed. "Use the environment. Listen." Using minimal movement, Cale positioned his companions behind natural cover while he moved to a vantage point that allowed him to monitor the clearing. From this position, he could anticipate the predator's strikes and redirect them using the terrain. With patience, precision, and coordination, they neutralized the threat without a single injury. It was a small victory, but in the dark forest, every small victory meant survival. Cale's leadership became apparent not just to his team but to those observing. His calm, calculated actions inspired trust and respect, while his rivals struggled with fear and indecision. Ryan Vaylor, still nursing his bruised ego, had formed a small group of his own, but his aggressive strategies faltered in the forest. His team panicked repeatedly, falling prey to illusions and minor predators. By comparison, Cale's group advanced methodically, leaving no trail of mistakes. As evening approached, the group found a secure hollow between two massive roots, a place safe from predators and hidden from view. Cale allowed a rare moment of rest, though his mind never stopped. He reviewed every movement, every decision made during the day, and noted improvements for the next stage. Leora, sitting beside him, finally spoke. "Cale, you make it look effortless, but I can see the calculations in your mind. How do you stay so calm?" Cale's gaze drifted to the alien sky glimpsed through the canopy. "Fear is wasted energy. Panic is wasted energy. Observe, adapt, survive. That is all that matters." The group remained silent for a while, each reflecting on the day's trials. For the first time, Cale's companions understood the depth of his abilities, not just his intelligence but his resilience, his patience and his unwavering focus. As night fell and the forest grew darker, strange sounds echoed through the trees, creatures moving in the shadows, leaves rustling in unnatural patterns, and the occasional faint whisper that seemed to come from nowhere. Most humans would have panicked. Cale remained vigilant, scanning, listening, and planning. His mind was a map of the forest, every threat anticipated, every risk calculated. And while his allies rested, Cale continued to analyze. He knew the next day would bring even greater challenges. The dark forest was only one stage of the Deathworld test, but it had already separated the careful, intelligent, and adaptive from the impulsive, reckless, and weak. In that alien darkness, one truth became clear: the quiet one in class was no longer invisible. Cale Draven was a force to be reckoned with. His calm, his mind, and his courage were already defining him as someone who would survive where others would fail. And in the heart of the dark forest, Cale smiled faintly to himself. The real test was only beginning, and he was ready. Because survival was not about strength or noise, it was about intelligence, strategy, and the human mind at its sharpest. Cale Draven had proven it once. In the dark forest he would prove it again. The ultimate confrontation. The announcement came just after the sun rose over the jagged horizon of Zyra 9. The final stage of the Deathworld test would pit the students against the planet's apex predator, the legendary Zarathus. Tales of the creature had been whispered for decades. Massive, intelligent, and almost impossible to defeat. Not a single student in Academy history had ever bested it. Most students trembled at the news. Panic and whispers spread through the group. Many imagined only death. But Cale Draven, silent as always, felt a surge of anticipation. This was the moment he had been preparing for, not for glory, not for recognition, but for survival. The terrain for the confrontation was a massive canyon, jagged cliffs rising on either side, with twisted rock formations creating natural cover and treacherous pitfalls. The air was thick with tension, a faint hum of energy radiating from the depths where the Zarathus lurked. Cale scanned every inch, noting where the shadows fell, where light reflected off rock surfaces, and where natural barriers could be used to his advantage. Ryan Vaylor, still bitter from previous failures, rallied a group of students. "We take it down with force," he declared. "We can't let a single predator decide our fate." His words carried bravado, but Cale saw the uncertainty behind them. Brute force would not work here. The Zarathus was not just strong, it was intelligent, cunning, and deadly. Cale turned to his allies, Leora, Jarek, and Mira, and spoke softly. "Observe first. Attack last. Every move must have purpose. Any mistake could be fatal." They nodded, understanding the unspoken gravity of his words. In Cale's calm, measured approach lay their best chance of survival. From the shadows of the canyon, the Zarathus emerged. Its massive frame glinted with iridescent scales that refracted light like a living prism. Each movement was deliberate, fluid, and terrifyingly precise. Its eyes, black as obsidian, scanned the canyon as if calculating every step the humans might take. It was a predator designed to hunt not just the body but the mind. Most students froze in fear. Cale, however, observed. He noticed patterns in the creature's movements, subtle shifts in its weight as it probed the canyon floor, and the faint vibration of its tail against the rock. Each detail was data, and Cale processed it faster than any human mind should be capable of. The battle began subtly. Ryan's group charged recklessly, weapons firing in bursts of energy. The Zarathus reacted instantly, swiping them aside with its massive limbs, reflecting their attacks with its armored scales. Panic erupted. Injuries were immediate and chaos reigned. Cale, by contrast, moved silently, using the terrain to his advantage. He led his small team along narrow ridges, behind rock formations, and through hidden crevices. Each move was calculated, designed to stay out of the predator's line of attack while gradually positioning them closer to their objective, the creature's weak points hidden beneath its iridescent scales. Using reflective fragments and natural light, Cale created subtle distractions, drawing the Zarathus' attention away from his team. He anticipated its movements before they happened, predicting where it would strike, how it would react, and the most effective angles for evasion. Leora, Jarek, and Mira followed flawlessly, moving as one, each action precise, each step minimizing risk. The Zarathus, for all its intelligence, underestimated the human mind. It reacted to visible threats, to noise and movement, but Cale's strategy relied on deception, patience, and ingenuity, qualities the predator could not anticipate. Slowly, methodically, Cale led it toward a natural trap in the canyon. A narrow crevice where the creature's massive frame would be restricted, its mobility limited. "Now," Cale whispered. In perfect synchronization, his team executed the plan. Leora triggered a rockfall that partially blocked the crevice, while Mira and Jarek created diversions with small energy pulses that reflected light into the predator's eyes. The Zarathus roared, a sound that shook the canyon walls, but it was trapped, unable to strike without risking itself. Kale approached with calculated precision, identifying the weak points in its armored scales, tiny gaps between crystalline plating. With a combination of tools and carefully timed strikes, he exploited these vulnerabilities, weakening the beast without reckless engagement. Every move was deliberate, every risk minimized. Hours passed in a tense standoff. The Zarathus, frustrated and cornered, lashed out with bursts of energy, shaking the ground and scattering debris. Most humans would have panicked under such relentless pressure, but Kale's calm never faltered. He adjusted strategies on the fly, predicting the predator's attacks and turning them into opportunities. Finally, with a coordinated final maneuver, Kale and his team disabled the creature's primary means of attack. The Zarathus collapsed, not dead but subdued, its intelligence still gleaming in its eyes, acknowledging the human's dominance. Kale stepped forward, holding a hand over the creature's head. His eyes met its gaze, not with hatred or malice but with understanding. This was the ultimate measure of humanity's ability. Not brute force, not speed, but intellect, adaptability, and cooperation. The surviving students who had witnessed the confrontation stared in disbelief. Ryan Vaylor, injured and humbled, could only shake his head. I didn't think it was possible, he muttered. How did you? Kale's expression remained calm. Observation, calculation, patience, he said. Every threat can be understood. Every challenge can be met if the mind is sharp enough. The instructors monitored the confrontation with approval. This was the essence of the Deathworld test. Humans facing challenges that exceeded physical limits, using intelligence, strategy, and adaptability to triumph where brute strength alone would fail. Kale had not only survived the ultimate predator, he had dominated it, proving the truth of the Academy's HFY philosophy. Human ingenuity was the greatest weapon of all. As the dust settled and the survivors regrouped, Kale's reputation was cemented. He had faced the apex predator of Zyra 9, a creature no other student had ever subdued, and he had done so without a hint of panic or reckless aggression. That night, as the alien sky glowed faintly with bioluminescent stars, Kale reflected on the trials. Every observation, every calculated decision, every careful movement had led to this moment. He had proven that silence could conceal power, that patience could defeat strength, and that intellect could overcome the most deadly threats the universe could throw at humanity. His allies, Leora, Jarek, and Mira, gathered near him, exhausted but alive. They had witnessed firsthand the quiet genius of the boy who had always remained in the background. Respect, awe, and a hint of fear filled their eyes. Kale had not sought recognition, but it had found him nonetheless. And in the heart of Zyra 9, the final lesson of the Deathworld test was clear. Survival was not about who was strongest or loudest, it was about who could think, adapt, and endure. Humans, with their minds capable of strategy, invention, and cooperation, had proven themselves once again. Kale Draven, the quiet one in class, had not only survived the Deathworld test, he had thrived, leaving a mark that would echo through the Academy for generations. Because on Zyra 9 and in the universe beyond, true strength was human intelligence, and Kale had it in abundance. The silent hero. The sun rose over Orion Prime Academy's observatory as Kale Draven and the surviving students returned from Zyra 9. The Deathworld test had ended, leaving a trail of exhausted bodies, bruised egos, and unforgettable lessons. The Academy staff and observers watched in awe as the students staggered back, their expressions a mix of relief, disbelief, and respect. Among all of them, Kale remained silent. He had spoken little throughout the trials, acted only when necessary, and let his actions speak louder than any words ever could. Yet now, in the aftermath of the most brutal test the Academy had ever devised, it was impossible for anyone to ignore him. The journey back had been quiet. His allies, Leora Vex, Jarek Thane, and Mira Solis, walked beside him, not needing to speak. They had learned that in the chaos of Zyra 9, the calmest mind was the strongest. Kale's silence had been their anchor, his observation their guide, and his intelligence their shield. Even Ryan Vaylor, once boastful and overconfident, trailed behind the group, humbled by his experiences. He had witnessed Kale subdue the Vorith beasts, navigate the dark forest, and ultimately confront the apex predator, Zarathus, with precision and control that defied imagination. Words failed him. All he could do was stare, begrudgingly impressed. The Academy's headmaster, Irinder Vallis, approached Cale as the group entered the central hall. His expression was unreadable at first, then slowly softened into a faint smile. "Cale Draven," he said, his voice echoing through the high ceilings, "you have done what no student has achieved in decades. You faced Zyra 9's deadliest challenges, outwitted predators that were said to be unbeatable, and survived trials designed to break the strongest minds. You are extraordinary." Cale nodded once, silently. There was no boast in his expression, no need for applause. Recognition meant little to him. Survival, mastery, and understanding were enough. As students and instructors began to recount the trials, the murmurs about Cale spread quickly. Stories of his calm precision, his flawless strategy, and his intelligence under pressure became legend. Many students who had ignored him in class now sought his guidance, hoping to understand the mind that had seen and overcome dangers that had claimed nearly half of their peers. Leora stepped forward, her eyes bright with admiration. "Cale, you saved us more than once. You guided us, protected us, and thought 5 steps ahead at every turn. Without you, we wouldn't have made it." Cale's gaze shifted to her, brief but meaningful. "We survived because we observed. Because we adapted. Because we didn't let panic make decisions for us." It was not a boast. It was a statement of fact. A principle that had carried them through the most lethal environment imaginable. Cale had proven that human intelligence, patience, and adaptability were superior to raw strength, weaponry, or aggression. Even Ryan, still nursing bruised pride, approached later. His words were hesitant, almost vulnerable. I misjudged you," he admitted. "I thought silence meant weakness. I was wrong." Cale said nothing. He didn't need to. His actions had already spoken volumes. Ryan's acknowledgement, begrudging though it was enough. Cale had no desire to seek validation from others. His satisfaction came from mastery over the trials, from proving that careful observation, calculated risk, and human ingenuity could triumph over seemingly insurmountable challenges. That evening, the Academy held a small ceremony for the survivors. Instructors recounted their courage, highlighted their strategy, and praised their perseverance. When it came time to acknowledge Cale, the room fell silent. All eyes were on the boy who had never spoken much, who had moved like a shadow through every trial, yet whose mind had reshaped the expectations of what a human could accomplish. "You are the embodiment of what it means to be human. Fight you," Headmaster Vallis announced. "Not through brute force, not through noise or flash, but through intelligence, adaptability, and courage. Cale Draven has shown that humanity's greatest strength is its mind, and that even in the deadliest conditions, we can survive and thrive." Applause echoed through the hall, but Cale remained seated quietly, a faint smile touching his lips. He did not crave recognition. He had accomplished what mattered most. He had survived, adapted, and mastered the challenges that others could not. As night fell, Cale returned to his quarters. He reflected on the trials, the Vorith beasts, the dark forest, the Zarathus, and every moment that had tested his limits. He understood now more clearly than ever that survival was not about being seen or being loud. It was about thinking, observing, anticipating, and acting with precision. It was about understanding both the environment and the people around you. For Cale Draven, the Deathworld test had been more than a trial. It had been a validation of the human mind's potential. Humans could endure, adapt, and overcome where others might fail. They were not the fastest, the strongest, or the loudest, but in the right mind, in the right hands, they were unstoppable. The next morning, as the Academy resumed its normal rhythm, students could not stop talking about Cale. He walked the halls as he always had, quiet and unassuming, yet now there was a subtle aura of respect and curiosity wherever he went. People watched, listened, and tried to learn from him. Cale did not seek their attention. He didn't need to. His silence was his strength, his calm his power. Actions, he knew, would always speak louder than words, and the universe had witnessed it. In the months and years that followed, Cale Draven became a legend within Orion Prime Academy. His story inspired new students, reshaped training methods, and reminded everyone that intelligence, patience, and observation could turn the quietest individual into a hero. The Deathworld test had revealed the truth. Human ingenuity was the ultimate weapon, and Cale had wielded it flawlessly. And though he never sought recognition, never asked for praise, and never boasted, Cale Draven had become something far greater than the Academy's whispers could capture. The silent hero, the human who had thrived when the universe tested every limit, proving that in silence, there can be unimaginable strength. The quiet one in class had not only survived the Deathworld test, he had conquered it. And in that victory, the legend of Cale Draven was born.